150 years ago, the theory of evolution found reception in the mind of Western man. It was not a new idea. It had been introduced in religious political documents in ancient Babylon, and later in secular contemplations of developing Greece. Erasmus Darwin came up with the idea of natural selection as a mechanism for evolution. His grandson Charles introduced the concept to the secular academic community, which was eager to embrace a non-theistic doctrine. This doctrine removed the need for a creator in the natural world and the need for accountability in the spiritual world. The text of this video series shows that evolution does not work in theory or in laboratory research. The evidence is heavily in favor of special creation. In this series of lectures, a complete creation model has been developed with extensive technical references. Prepare to have your mind dramatically expanded and your faith academically justified as our speaker, Dr. Carl Baugh, takes you on a fascinating journey from the microscopic to the galactic. Discover creation in symphony.
Hello, I'm Carl Baugh, Director of Creation Evidences Museum in Glen Rose and Director of International Expeditions looking for living dinosaurs. Welcome to the discussion today. We're going to discuss very intimate questions which have to do with your past, your present, and your future, and that of all of mankind. We're going to talk about dinosaurs: Tyrannosaurus rex, Pachycephalosaurus, Acrocanthosaurus. Are there any dinosaurs still alive today? Recently, our team arrived from an international expedition in the jungles of Papua New Guinea. We have over a dozen eyewitness accounts of creatures that for the world sound like in the description of those personal eyewitness accountants, including pastors, educators, school teachers, heads of clans, chieftains. These creatures, according to those descriptions, for the world sound like rhynchorhynchoid pterodactyls with leather-like wings, reptiles with a beak, a crest, hands on their wings, webbed feet. These creatures glow in the dark from their undersection. Often the tail glows in the dark. For you scholars in the audience, you'll recognize that a pterodactyl that has a tail would be a rhynchorhynchoid pterodactyl. Now, according to the theory of evolution, which in the past I have believed and taught, but do no longer believe nor teach, according to the theory of evolution, rhynchorhynchoid pterodactyls saw their demise 225 million years ago. Are they still around? Well, let's explore the issue. I'm glad you're here. By the way, how did you get here? Well, I don't mean your mode of transportation, the vehicle in which you arrived. I mean, how did you get here? You as a person, living, breathing, thinking, reasoning, feeling, deciding, sensing all that's about you. How did you get here? That question is central to what makes us tick and all our future. It's central to our reasoning processes. The great philosophers of the centuries have asked that question along with three others. Every grandmother in this audience, every child, every granddad, every parent, every individual that has walked down sandy trails and jungles, every individual who has faced the asphalt jungles of modern civilization, every philosopher and scientist has asked these four questions. These are the great questions of life. Number one, who am I? Who are you? Number two, how did I get here? That's the question I asked a moment ago. What brought me here? What are the life processes? Did I arrive by naturalistic circumstances with a fortunate combination of time, chance, and inanimate matter? Did the universe produce me in an evolutionary, naturalistic means? Or was I supernaturally created in the original proto-form. How did I get here? Number 3, what am I doing here? What's my purpose here? Number 4, where am I going? All of these issues are germane to the issues of life. All people ask these questions. They may not phrase them in that particular phraseology, but all individuals worldwide have always asked these questions, and we're going to explore these questions and hopefully arrive at some plausible academic answers. This program examines life origins, comparison of life origins, evolution or creation. Who am I? How did I get here? What's my purpose here, and where am I going? We've been taught in this modern generation, and I have explored educational paths down dusty trails in distant lands and down jungle trails and sandy beaches. I've lectured in some of the major universities and some of the colleges of the world. I've lectured to private audiences, and I've been concerned about these questions. Life origins, comparison of life origins. There was a time when I personally thought humanistic and atheistic thoughts. There was a time when I believed and taught evolution. What changed my own thinking? Let's explore the issues. Is it possible for evolution to have occurred? Two of the world's great scholars, astrophysicists, Sir Frederick Hoyle, Ph.D., and Chandra Wickramasinghe, Ph.D., explored the issues recently with unlimited funding, unlimited access to the libraries and laboratories of the world, and they wanted to know the answer to the question, is it possible for life to have originated somewhere in the universe or on planet Earth by naturalistic means? And that's illustrated in the Big Bang Theory, timeline of the universe, the naturalistic concept. And we have paraphrased that academically to show a moment of infinite temperature and inflation, an era of inflation. The documentation early, according to the postulate of humanists and astrophysicists who work in cosmology, of gravity, a strong force, electromagnetic force, and a weak force. And then a time when the universe became transparent, very early in the evolution of the universe, according to standard evolutionary model. And then a time when galaxies and quasars began to appear, and the current chaotic universe becoming self-realizing in the mind of man. What are the possibilities that this could occur? After spending more than a decade examining the issues and having at their disposal unlimited funding, unlimited access to the great libraries and laboratories of the world, Sir Frederick Hoyle and Chandra Wickramasinghe came to a conclusion. They stated that life originating in this universe or on planet Earth by naturalistic circumstances has one chance in 10 to the 40,000th power. Let me say that again. One chance in 10 to the 40,000th power. And then these two great scholars said, let's illustrate how impossible that is. They said it would be easier for a whirlwind to sweep through a junkyard and assemble a Boeing 747 jet in flight out the other end than it would be for life to have originated on planet Earth or in the universe by natural evolutionary means. Let me illustrate how large that number really is. One chance in 10 to the 40,000th power. You see, physicists tell us that in the entire universe, whether the universe began as an expression of the creativity of a personal God, or whether the universe began by naturalistic means, the sum total of data is identical. Now, according to the measurements and calculations of physicists, there are in the entire universe 10 to the 80th power of electrons. If we filled the entire universe with electrons, you know there's a lot of space out there, a lot of apparent nothingness, even though there are atoms and the space itself has a field of energy. But if we filled the entire space of the universe with electrons, which would be the smallest unit of measurable particle, if we filled it all, we would have 10 to the 130th power of electrons. Now, that means it would be easier for someone to mark a single electron, to blindfold a man, have him wander throughout the entire universe, give him one chance, one guess. He would have to accurately select that particular electron. It would be much easier for that to happen than for life to have originated by natural evolutionary means. Again, those figures are one chance in 10 to the 40,000th power. Now, these were not creationists and Christians and theologians analyzing the data. This was Sir Frederick Hoyle and Chandra Wickramasinghe, recognized internationally as great scholars. I have at my disposal the complete works of Charles Darwin. He's the hero of the evolutionary plot. I have the complete works of his bulldog, Huxley. I have some other works here representing atheistic thinking. And these are all at the disposal of our committee. By the way, at the Creation Evidences Museum, we have over 50 scholars, consultants, who travel from major universities or their own laboratories and spend time in research with us. We're doing research that one of NASA's engineers who helped design the most successful experiment in space that NASA has biologically performed stated to the press that the research we're doing at the Creation Evidences Museum in low-profile temporary facilities is more important than all the work he had ever done, even for NASA. And I think before the program is over, if you'll stay with me, you'll understand why this is so important. We're trying to solve the basic issues of life. Life origins. Is creation plausible? Is evolution plausible? Charles Darwin is the hero of the plot, not because he had scientific data. Charles Darwin did some good work, not with the finches, that was compromised work, but he did some good work with earthworms and insects. However, he's the hero of the plot not because of his scientific achievement. He's the hero of the plot because he's the first man in history to have expressed verbally and publicly that his mind, in its chaotic disposition, was the chaotic universe finally self-realizing its own existence. Let me say that again. Charles Darwin had some major problems. He was phobic. He was a hypochondriac. He was a tormented man. Major, complete volumes have been written about the torment of his life. He was chaotic. He didn't like anything that smacked of design. He liked chaos because his own mind was in chaos, and he felt that his mind was the universe expressing itself in chaotic form. Now that is central to the evolutionary concept. Let me explain. We have a chart designed by our research, encompassing more than 35 years, and published scholastically by the Creation Evidences Museum, illustrating the theory of evolution. It begins with a Big Bang or a steady state thesis, either apply in this naturalistic state. It continues through the nebular hypothesis, which essentially means that debris from the Big Bang coalesced in the area of the solar system about 4.6 billion years ago, according to the evolutionary theory. Now, I've stated something quite important there. You see, according to the theory of evolution, life processes on planet Earth are the product of debris from a Big Bang. What that really means is subliminally, if we accept the naturalistic postulate of evolution, we're really the product of debris. We started as a piece of trash from an explosion. And these life processes continued in progression. Now, subliminally, that's important in the theory of evolution, that we began as debris, and then life organized itself. We'll talk about that a bit later. Finally, man arrived on the scene some 4.6 billion years after the coalescence of debris from that explosion. But that's not the end of the story. According to the theory of evolution, these masses of stars, this solar system, will continue to expand out and out and out until it dies a heat death. Or, if there's enough mass in the universe to cause the universe to collapse back upon itself, then we'll die with a fiery explosion. Either way, there's no hope. Hopelessness is written into the very warp and woof of the concept of evolution. It's extremely important that I get that across. Hopelessness, despair. British philosopher Bertrand Russell spent a lifetime analyzing the chaos and the hopelessness of evolutionary naturalism. And he finally said, we must settle for unyielding despair. He said, all the high noon of genius, all the hopes of man, all the work of individual lives will ultimately collapse in a fiery explosion, the death of the solar system. And all that's left is unyielding despair. Well, I'd like to settle for a lot more than that, and I'd like to give you some hope. Will evolution work? According to these two great scholars, Sir Frederick Hoyle and Chandra Wickramasinghe, it won't work. Let's take it further. The current modern theorist who has the attention of the entire world is Stephen Jay Gould of Harvard. In Natural History, he wrote not long ago, I regard the failure to find a clear vector of progress in life's history as the most puzzling fact of the fossil record. Another scholar, Professor L.B. Halstead, an atheist, wrote in Nature, there are no actual fossils directly antecedent to man, nothing directly linking us with the rest of the world. We've been taught academically that mutations have produced these ever-ascending spiral forms of life until finally, here we are. But it just won't work. Again, Stephen Jay Gould of Harvard University and American Museum of Natural History wrote, a mutation doesn't produce major new raw material. It doesn't make a new species by mutating that species. That's a common idea people have, that evolution is due to random mutations. A mutation is not the cause of evolutionary change. And end quote. Well, if it's not the cause of evolutionary change, what is the cause of evolutionary change? Punctuated equilibria is the current school of thought, and it simply says, and Stephen Jay Gould and Niles Eldredge are the designers of this concept, that thought simply states that you can't really observe evolution occurring. Since there's no clear vector of progress, no clear line of ascent in the fossil record, you find individual life forms separate and distinct and functional. And since there's no clear line of ascent, evolution can't really be observed. It's off on the side. It occurs quickly by evolutionary standards, but it manifests itself in the mainstream as a new variation or new life form or ultimately a new species. Well, that's a very convenient thought. You'll never find the evidence because it's hidden, but one leading evolutionary scholar admitted that his friends were absolutely sure that evolution was true if they could only find the evidence. It appears to me that the concept of evolution is really based on faith, not fact. In fact, I brought from the Humanist, January-February 1983 edition, Religion for a New Age, a statement. John J. Dunfrey wrote the following, I'm convinced that the battle for mankind's future must be waged and won in the public school classroom by teachers who correctly perceive their role as the proselytizers of a new faith. The current issue of the origin of species and the descent of man has an introduction written by a world-class scholar. And he said, evolution is really a faith. It's a mindset. It's a way of looking at things. But Dunfrey continued a little further, and he said, a religion of humanity that respects the spark of what theologians call divinity in every human being. These teachers must embody the same selfless dedication as the most rabid fundamentalist preachers, for they will be ministers of another sort, utilizing a classroom instead of a pulpit to convey humanist values in whatever subject they teach. Now, I want to point out something. There are very fine, well-meaning educators who assume that the theory of evolution and the concept of creation are really compatible. They assume that you can really hold to both. But leading humanists and evolutionists admit rather readily that it isn't quite like that. In fact, their intentions are very clear. The classroom must and will become an arena of conflict between the old and the new. These are not my statements, but the statements published globally by the Humanist Association. Conflict between the old and the new. The rotting corpse of Christianity, together with all its adjacent evils and misery, and the new faith of humanism, resplendent in its promise of a world in which a never-realizing Christian ideal of love thy neighbor will finally be achieved. That is the prospect. I think we need to recognize that the lines are clearly drawn. Now the question, will evolution work? In our research at the Creation Evidences Museum, with scholars from major universities participating, we've uncovered some very startling evidence. I want to point out some of that evidence to you today. Now, in order for you to recognize the importance of this evidence, let me take you again to the chart which we have formulated. This chart expresses the concept of evolution as the evolutionists themselves desire it be expressed, beginning with the Big Bang, the nebular hypothesis of debris from that Big Bang coalescing in our solar system area. And then about 4.6 billion years ago, life got down to earnest. About 3.5 billion years ago, early bacteria evolved. About 550 million years ago, according to the evolutionary theory, trilobites, Calomini trilobites, evolved. Then about 250 million years ago, lepidodendron, a plant that today is a club moss reaching no more than 18 inches in stature, but found in the fossil record up to 120 feet tall, lepidodendron. We excavated one at Glenrose with Nova filming over my shoulder during that excavation. About 250 million years ago, according to the evolutionary theory, lepidodendron arrived. And then, about 228 million years ago, the dinosaurs arrived. About 100 million years ago, the dinosaurs at Glenrose roamed. Then about 6 million years ago, the great cats arrived. And finally, about 3.5 million years ago, man arrived and looked back on all of the evolving process and could appreciate it. Well, let me show you what we have excavated in original, in situ, academic excavation. In the very same rock stratum, the same layer, living at the same time originally, we excavated two trilobites. One was a Calomini. Now, according to the theory of evolution, that trilobite lived a short time, 550 million years ago. In the same layer, living at the same time, we excavated a big lepidodendron that, according to evolution, lived only 250 million years ago. So we've brought these tangible life forms from 550 million up to 250 million years of age. But it's better still. We excavated a big Acrocanthosaurus dinosaur. I have the privilege of being the discoverer of and the excavation of the largest Acrocanthosaurus and the most complete Acrocanthosaurus that ever lived, or at least that has been found so far. He looked a lot like Tyrannosaurus rex, except he had a Texas flare. He had spikes down his spinal column all the way near the tip of his tail. That's how he got his name, high-spined lizard. And the one we excavated stood about 20 feet tall and 40 feet long. The curator of Dallas Museum of Natural History. Came down to see some of the bones. I showed him one of the large vertebrae. He looked at me and he said, "Dr. Baugh, it is true then, Acrocanthosaurus was as large as any Tyrannosaurus rex that ever lived." So we excavated one. But now, he was found at Glenrose, and those rocks are assigned 100 million years in age. Watch closely what we've done. We've brought into one time frame life forms that supposedly lived 550 million years ago, up to live with life forms that supposedly lived 250 million years ago, up to life forms that supposedly lived 100 million years ago, but it gets better. In the very same rock layer, we excavated 7 cat prints. I mean Texas-size cat prints. This is the Burdick print. We have the original of this cat print that has been sectioned. We can see the lamination, pressure lines in it very conclusively. We excavated 7 cat prints. This one is 7 inches across at the flange. This cat would have stood about 6 feet at the shoulders. Now, according to the theory of evolution, the great cats didn't arrive until 6 million years ago. But we found that they lived simultaneous with the dinosaurs. Now, that certainly disrupts the evolutionary concept of things. Here we have the great cats in the same layer with the dinosaurs, with Lepidodendron, and with the trilobites. Finally, in the very same rock layer, we excavated 57 human footprints. How important is that? 2 of the nation's leading evolutionary scholars, Drs. Milne and Schaefersman, admitted in Journal of Geological Education that if we could prove just that man and dinosaur lived contemporaneously, that would destroy the entire concept of evolution. Well, we've done a lot more than that. We've shown not only that man and dinosaur lived contemporaneously, but that the great cats, the lepidodendron plants, the trilobites all lived simultaneously. Let's examine some of this evidence. I brought to class, or to this discussion today, the original of the Burdick print. Now, this footprint is 14 inches long. It's in a slab of rock, the original slab of rock, that of course is much larger. If you examine it very closely, you'll see the ridges where it was chiseled out of the river. You'll see where they started to chisel much closer to the toes when they marked their score line. Then they realized they were going to get too close to the flange and the little toe, so they marked the score line further out. Now, this is 14 inches long. Someone in this audience might suggest that's too big to have been of human origin. Well, let me show you that just yesterday in the Dallas Morning News, there was an article showing the foot size of Lorenzo Williams of the Dallas Mavericks. And his foot size is 14 inches. His shoe is a little longer than 14 inches long. That shows that man certainly has the capability of making a print that large. I personally knew Max Palmer. Max Palmer stood 8 feet 2 inches tall. He died at age 56. At the museum we have his coat and tie and the recording of his foot. Max at 8'2" had a foot that was 15.5 inches long, longer than the Burdick print. Just yesterday, one of my colleagues and I picked up the current issue of the Guinness Book of Records, 1995. This Guinness Book of Records states that Robert Wadlow of Alton, Illinois, stood 11.1 inches tall. He died at a young age, by the way. His ultimate weight was 439 pounds. Robert Wadlow had a foot that was size 37 AA shoe. That was 18.5 inches long. Well, now 18.5 inches long would exceed the length of the entire piece of rock. Yes, it is possible for mankind to possess a foot as large as the depression here. Now, I'm not suggesting that all people have the capability, genetic capability of possessing a foot that would make a track that size. But it certainly is within the realm of possibility for mankind. Is this a genuine footprint? We sectioned it. You can see the areas where it was sectioned. A very fine university some years ago sectioned in this area alone across the flange, assuming that the depression lines would show there better. However, in our research we found that man is very unique. Programmed from the brain, he walks in a unique fashion. He first plants his heel, and then he rocks the foot forward, planting the ball and the great toe in a lateral motion, and then he rocks the foot to the side, and then he depresses the toes in forward locomotion. That is a unique mannerism. It begins here, transfers there, and forward. That's a unique motion of mankind. Therefore, we knew we had to section across the heel to see if the greater pressure would be there, because the initial pressure line certainly should be there. I brought, for our discussion today, photographs of the sectioned area, this immediate area. This is the actual footprint. There's no question that the clear lamination lines of pressure are shown. That is a genuine footprint. One leading evolutionary humanistic scholar in this area said, all right, you've shown that that's a clear human footprint. He had previously said it was a carving. He said, obviously that's a footprint, a genuine footprint. However, he said it's a dinosaur footprint on which someone has carved toes. He admitted that it was a genuine footprint because of the lamination pressure lines. Then we sectioned the forward area twice to make sure that the data was consistent. You can see we sectioned there and forward. In both lines, we found a very clear compression under the great toe. We found a dispersion of pressure, which is common when crystalline material is compressed with another indenture. We found under each of the toes indication that pressure had been applied. This is a genuine footprint. Do you understand the importance of this footprint? If we could prove that man and dinosaur lived contemporaneously, with no precursors leading up, no life forms graduating to man, man and dinosaur living either in the distant past or the recent past, it would have the same devastating effect. But not only do we have human footprints, we excavated, by the way, 7 of this exact stature, 14 inches in length. We have some other things that I think you'd like to see. I brought with me today some treasures. First, the theory of evolution is taught consistently and academically around the world. We have in safety deposit a very rare and special fossil. This fossil is Hesperopithecus Harold Cooki, commonly known as the Nebraska Man. Well, the Nebraska Man was used in the famous Scopes evolution trial in Dayton, Tennessee by Clarence Darrow, who had behind him the scholarship of America's leading paleoanthropologist, Henry Fairfield Osborn of Harvard University and American Museum of Natural History. And Dr. Henry Fairfield Osborn stated, "This is the best evidence for evolution that we have on the American continents." He said, that clearly is graduation from an ape to a man. It's an ape graduating to a man. And if you look at it very closely, it certainly looks like a human molar, but not quite like a human molar. It looks like an ape's molar, but not quite like an ape's molar. So according to this great scholar in his day in 1925, that's from an ape graduating, progressing, evolving to become a human being. Now, Because of that evidence in the trial, the day was ultimately won for evolution. Evolution was thereby introduced into the American public school system and ultimately into the school systems around the world, primarily because of the evidence of this fossil. It was 1925. The original discovery had been made in 1923. In 1926, Harold Cook, the geologist who made the original discovery, went back to western Nebraska, excavated in the same gravel pit, and found the rest of the skeleton, the rest of the teeth. In fact, this is one of the other teeth. This is not the tooth used at the trial or referred to at the trial, but this is from the very same jaw of the tooth used at the trial. Harold Cook went back to Nebraska, excavated, found the rest of the skeleton, including the jaws and the teeth, with one missing. He had the one that missed, and it fit perfectly. Now, I wonder, did it turn out to be an ape or a man or an ape man? None of the above. It turned out to be a pig. Peccary. The admission was not made publicly until years later, and finally the admission was made that Hesperopithecus was found to be peccary. The average individual would have no idea what peccary would mean. Well, it simply means pig, an extinct pig. By the way, there is currently a variety of pig in one of the primitive areas of the world that produces a molar like that. That's from a pig. But the evolutionary concept continued. I brought some other things. I wanted you to get something from our discussion today. Well, the question is, did we arrive by evolution or by creation? You've learned that leading scholars have admitted that evolution simply will not work. But they say that's the only plausible explanation we have. Well, is it? Other leading scholars have admitted that if we could show that man and dinosaur lived contemporaneously, that would destroy the concept of evolution and verify that the entire thing had to be by direct creation. I brought a priceless artifact for you to see. This was excavated near Glenrose in the very same layer with the dinosaur footprints in the Walnut Shale, which is adjacent to the Comanche, which is adjacent to the Glenrose and Biloxi formations of limestone. I've had 20 different medical scholars analyze this fossil. It's priceless. It's a fossilized human finger. Notice the fingernail, the cuticle, the taper. Notice the medial joint. We sectioned it and found inside the replaced bone, the replaced cartilaginous ligaments, and the replaced epidermis, the skin, all perfectly preserved. I've had 20 different medical scholars analyze it. All 20 have confirmed that it is a human digit. From the medial joint forward, some have expertise to state that it is the fourth finger on the left hand of a girl. How do we know it came from a girl? There are two ways we can determine that. First, because of the taper. We men normally have a more blunt profile to the end of our finger. This is a more tapered profile. But look very closely. The back section of the replaced nail is flattened. Now, men do not produce flattened nails, but ladies, because of a beneficial bacterium, once every 28 days are susceptible to a flattening of the nails. Once every 28 days, a lady is susceptible to a beneficial bacterium that flattens the back portion of the nail. That's part of her metabolic profile. This is a human finger and a lady's finger. Now, there are other things about this which are quite interesting. It's slightly swollen, just slightly. And then it is slightly flattened. That would indicate to us a number of things. If you die by drowning, the metabolism of the human body inevitably causes that body to bloat and float. And if you're caught in a flood, then you will have compression of the members of your body. Now, I've often been asked the question, is it possible for soft tissue to be preserved? It is. It is rare, but it's possible for soft tissue such as the fingernail, the bone, cartilaginous ligaments, the epidermis, the skin to be preserved. And in proof of that, we have from Safety Deposit a worm, just a common earthworm. This earthworm was found near the museum in our excavations in Cretaceous layering. The same layering in which this tract was excavated, the same layering in which the finger was excavated. This is an earthworm. When I put water on the earthworm, even some of the pink pigmentation is still there. The band, the ring, is still intact. I've had very fine biologists examine it. There's no question that it is an earthworm. Well, if the soft tissue of a worm can be preserved, there should be no problem in the same conditions preserving a finger. But leading evolutionary scholars have said, all right, you have footprints. Those are somewhat subjective, even though man uniquely makes a footprint that is very distinctive. You have a human finger, but show us an actual man-made artifact to show that we're talking about intelligent man. We're talking about a prototype. In our opinion, those long ages are not there at all. In our opinion, the world before the flood, in the equispheric balance, which we will discuss shortly, that world before the flood in its equispheric balance would have produced the optimal genetic expression of living forms. And thus, they were intelligent people. I brought from Safety Deposit the real artifact, a very special artifact. It is the London artifact. It's a hammer, a man-made artifact. We're currently having wood from the handle carbon dated to give us a relative dating technique. Originally, it was found by Frank and Emma Hahn, now deceased, as a concretion, completely encasing all of the artifact. They simply found in an area with adjacent material like it, they found a rock with a stick protruding from the rock. They took it home. Their son, who spent years as a professor at Ohio State University, chipped the top of it off and was amazed to find inside a man-made artifact. Now, this is 6 1/4 inches in length. It's very sophisticated. It's octagonal in design, has an eye, even originally had a wedge inside the handle to keep it in place. Now, I took this hammer to Battelle Lab in Columbus, Ohio. That's the lab that analyzed the moonstones. Same lab, same technician, same instrument analyzed this as analyzed the original moonstones. We did a scanning electron microprobe elemental analysis and found that this artifact is 96.6% iron. That's very pure iron. 0.74% sulfur, and 2.6% chlorine. That's mind-boggling. Our best laboratories today, our finest minds, cannot compound iron with chlorine. Yet, we have iron compounded with chlorine with a minimal amount of sulfur. Now, that's amazing. Whoever made this had to be a master artisan. We do not know if this was deposited in the worldwide flood, or in the Peleg experience a few hundred years after the flood. We do not know when it was deposited, but we do know this. It was found and has been confirmed to have been within the same layer in which dinosaur footprints and dinosaur remains are found. Whenever this hammer was fabricated, dinosaurs were still around, and as we learned a few moments ago, pterodactyl dinosaurs probably are still around. Here's a part of the overlay material. Inside you'll see a groove of the hammer, and this was a part of the material over the top of the artifact. Scholars came from global communities, according to the Hans, and each would want a little fragment that they had chipped off the top of this marvelous artifact, and ultimately nothing was left but the large portion with the secondary portion. I'm trying to say that man and dinosaur did live contemporaneously. Let me make another point which I think is extremely important. According to the theory of evolution, it took the granite 300 million years to crystallize. I want you to notice on this model done by world-famous artist Robert Summers, the granite as illustrated just below the surface on the planet, and this illustrates the original creation. And the granite, of course, underlies all the continents. Originally, it did underlie the sea basins as well. According to the theory of evolution, it took that granite 300 million years to crystallize. I have with me a piece of granite. Dr. Robert Gentry is a world-class scholar, and Dr. Gentry has analyzed over 200,000 samples of granite worldwide. Some of these samples have been brought up from core drills deep in the crust of the earth. Some have been located on the surface of the earth as well. Now, inside this granite, you'll see little black flakes. These are normally called mica or biotite. This granite holds part of the answer to the question, how did we get here? You see, there are only two models. Leading evolutionary scholars have admitted the two models exhaust the possibilities. Either we were created by the direct fiat design of a personal creator, or we arrived by natural processes. Dr. Robert Gentry, with a microscope, looked inside this black mica or biotite. He found tiny little rings called pleochroic halos from the energy radiation from radioactive materials. Now, the signature of these rings is very, very specific. And not only did he find the rings left by the decay of uranium, thorium, strontium, rubidium, potassium, argon, radioactive lead, Pb-207, etc., but he found the rings left by the radioactive decay of polonium, polonium-218, 210, and 214. Now, remember, the evolutionary concept is that it took 300 million years for this granite to crystallize. Yet at all depths, Dr. Gentry found in the granite these rings left by polonium. The half-life of polonium-218 is less than 3 minutes. Scholars in this audience will recognize that after 7 half-lives of any radioactive material, all measurable amounts of that material have been exhausted. So you can only multiply by 7 for the outside possibility of time duration. He found polonium-218 halos. Now, the half-life is less than 3 minutes. That means that in order to record that polonium-218 had been in the granite at all, this granite had to be crystallized, functional, and recording in less than 3 minutes. At the outside, 20 minutes. But it's better still. Dr. Gentry found at all levels in this mica, biotite, crystalline material inside the granite the rings left by polonium-214. The half-life of polonium-214 is 0.000164 seconds, 164 microseconds. All 7 half-lives would be expended faster than I can snap my finger. That means that if you look at the data objectively, there's no possibility of long eons of time in the formation of the granite. It means this granite had to be functional and crystallized as a part of the design of the Creator in the original creation. Let's explore one other area before pausing briefly. Is there a possibility that living systems could have evolved Dr. Robert Gange, with the Smirnoff Research Facility in Princeton, New Jersey, has taken the literature from microbiological laboratories and has found that evolution is absolutely impossible. And he illustrates it like this. Inside all material is information. For instance, inside the atom, even the hydrogen atom, there's an informational exchange between the electron, the proton, the neutron. There's an informational exchange. Dr. Gange takes the literature published by major scholars in major laboratories at major universities to show that you can take all of the natural information, the information in all of the natural inorganic materials of the entire planet Earth, and it comes out to be 160 bits of information. Now, 160 bits of information is a lot of information. Actually, 270 bits of information would be the equivalent of 10 to the 80th power. So that's a lot of information. All of the information and all of the natural elements of planet Earth put together, the inorganic elements, the entire globe, that information is 160 bits of information. Let's take the entire solar system, including the globe, our Earth, the Sun, 8 other planets, asteroids, debris, etc., and it comes out to 170 bits of information. Let's take the entire universe. It comes out to be 235 bits of information. But now let's go to living material. Living material is another ball game entirely. Living material is extremely complicated. First of all, it's three-dimensional. And then every single component is interdependent and codependent on every other component. The smallest unit of living information we know anything about is a protein molecule. One protein molecule holds 1,500 bits of information. Now, did you get that? The entire universe of non-living material holds 235 bits of information, but one single non-replicating unit of living material, one protein molecule, holds 1,500 bits of information. What's the difference between 235 bits of information and 1,500 bits of information? Light years between. Now let's go to information that can produce a reproducing cell, a bacterium. A common bacterium is E. coli. E. coli is in the intestinal tract of every person watching this video at the moment. One single E. coli bacterium, just one, holds 7 million bits of information. Now let's go to a human cell. One single human cell holds 20 billion bits of information. If the evolutionist wants his primordial soup pond with the right gases, energy system, and lightning strokes, give it to him. Give him an entire Earth as a primordial soup pond. Give him the entire universe. Fill the universe with electrons and let the universe have his 15 billion years, 30 billion years. Give it an eternity of time for each electron to writhe, cohort, and experiment with every other electron in the entire universe. It is impossible for the entire universe, given an eternity of time, since it holds only 270 bits of information, to produce a single protein molecule, let alone a reproducing bacterium or ultimately a human cell. Watch this and we'll break. A book has been written recently by a major scholar in Australia, Michael Denton, Evolution, Theory, and Crisis. And Dr. Denton admitted, evolution just won't work. He's an evolutionist, but it just won't work. He said, for instance, in the cell, the DNA provides the information for the protein synthesis apparatus. Yet, it's that protein synthesis apparatus that provides the very proteins for the DNA to exist. That protein synthesis apparatus provides the protein phosphate compounds for the energy system, Yet the energy system of mitochondria, etc., provides the actual energy for the protein synthesis to function. That protein synthesis provides the proteins for the cell membrane, yet the membrane holds that entire synthesis apparatus intact. In other words, everything is interdependent and codependent on everything else. Evolution just won't work.
In Lecture 1, we learned that evolution is not plausible. In Lecture 2, you will learn that design abounds in all the creation.